What's going on, YouTube? Evan here with Cloud9 Aquariums. Today we're finally going to be able to wrap up the playlist that basically has to do with how to dirt a tank. Okay, so if you've already watched the playlist, you're on the same track with me and you're not surprised by this 90 gallon sitting behind me right now. If for some chance you haven't watched the playlist, I recommend stopping the video right now, going back to the beginning. Very easy to find it. I got it all set up in a playlist. You can watch it from start to finish. And it basically just describes how to set up the tank from scratch, specifically dirted and planted, obviously. So, a couple surprises, but I guess I'll get into those first, and then we can actually talk about the rest of the video. Basically, I kind of alluded to it throughout this entire process as to what I was going to put in here, but I never really told you what was going in. So, shock and awe, I've got rainbows in here. Okay, we've got a couple new faces in here you may not recognize. I've got 3 8 lines going on in here, but I still have the rose lines. I've still got some Australians and some salmons, and I've also got a nice little cleanup crew going on right now with just 4 standard plecos. So, by all means, is it done? No, absolutely not. I actually have some Bosemani's growing out right now that are going to be added to this tank also. There's about 10 of those that are going to not necessarily all of them are going to go in, but we're going to put a large number of them in here. But again, they're a little bit too small to put in yet. So, if you were guessing it's going to be a rainbow tank, you were right. Congratulations. Give yourself a pat on the back. I guess let's get into it. The basic thing I really want to talk about with the final step of setting up a dirted tank is really just how to find and achieve that perfect balance. Okay, and a lot of times other tanks will really fall into that balance a lot easier than, say, a dirted tank. And the reason I say that it's not necessarily for a beginner, your first tank shouldn't be a dirted, is because achieving that perfect balance doesn't happen instantaneously. And not only does it not happen instantaneously, but it can give you kind of running for your money if you don't have someone to kind of point you as to what you can do to kind of prevent some of these little mishaps from happening. So the biggest thing that you're going to notice if you try to do this without any guidance is that you're going to have a giant algae bloom. Now there's a couple ways that I deal with it every time I try to set up one of these, and as you can see, I'm not having any problems with algae. Knock on something. So we're having a good time. Everybody's doing great. And here's my basic philosophy when it comes to controlling algae in a freshly set up dirty tank. Okay, your obvious first thing, at least it should be obvious, is frequent water changes. Very large water changes. It kind of sucks in a larger tank, yeah, but at the same time it's going to save you a lot of hassle, because the big deal with dirted is that you're going to be getting a lot of excess nutrients, as that dirt is just kind of, for the first time meeting water, I guess you could say. There's a lot of stuff going around. Especially when you fill the tank up the first time, you're going to have just a lot of nutrients in the water, and there's no way your plants, which aren't really rooted yet, are going to have any chance of absorbing even remotely close to the percentage of that. So what you need to do is consistently change your water. Now normally I would say, I'm a firm believer of a weekly water change, but this is the type of thing when you're really going to start having to crack down on it. I mean, almost, when I first set it up for the first week, you're talking every other day. Okay, if you're going to do something like that, 50%, awesome, fantastic. Depending on, if you're trying to do this with no fish in there, then go ahead and do a 75%. You can't hurt anything. All you're doing is really just preventing that. But once you've got the whole thing cycled and stuff, then by all means, throw your fish in there. And the second step of after your water changes that I like to do is get a cleanup crew, okay? It doesn't have to be anything really remotely crazy, but I got 4 plecos in here, just little guys right now. Of course, they're going to be giant soon, but 4 plecos, and as you can see, they've kept this thing spotless. Now, remember that because pleco's main diet obviously is veggies and things of that nature, and most people think all they eat is algae. Well, the thing is, if you don't have any algae in your tank, they're not going to be doing so well. So remember, if you're putting plecos in a fresh tank, that there's probably not going to be much for them to eat, so you're going to want to put in some algae wafers just to help them along. Okay, so definitely make sure you're feeding them, otherwise you're going to notice that they're not going to grow if they even survive. But back to taking care of your algae, so that's another step that I like to do. A third thing I've also mentioned in previous videos when I was talking about lighting systems and things of that nature is that I really do like to, how do I describe this? I like to change the hours that I will do my lights. So for instance, it's something called the wall set method. I know I've talked about it before, but in some of my tanks I will specifically set my timer to go on for 4 hours, and it goes off for 4 hours, and it goes back on for 4 hours. And the basic thing about that is you're trying to just interrupt the cycle of the lighting, and it also just helps to kind of wean that algae. It doesn't really gain a firm grasp if you don't give it that full 8 hours. Some people I've seen do 12 hours, you know, so you don't need to get too crazy with that, is what I'm trying to say. Is it fully necessary? No. This tank right now, believe it or not, I'm actually not doing that. So I do it on all my other tanks for the most part that are planted with dirt because they've been set up for a while. And right now I'm not on that exact cycle. I'm actually just trying an 8-hour cycle right now because I'm not running with super high lighting or anything like that. And it seems to be working fine with me. So it's one of those things where I recommend trying that method if you're having algae problems. Not necessarily do you have to do that. And of course, if you're going to do that, by all means, be smart about it and make your timer go on and off so that when you're home, you're able to enjoy your fish. You know, I like to have my fish awake. Usually they wake up about a half hour before I do, so when I'm up, they're already, you know, swimming around. Because if you're the one turning your tank on in the morning, chances are if you've seen the fish tank turn on, the first half hour they're kind of just waking up and it's really kind of boring. So it's nice to have them already turned on when you come out. They're all swimming around ready to go. You go to work, you come back, and you know, sometime while you're at work they went off, took a little nap or whatever. But now that you're home, boom, they're awake again, and you get to enjoy them for a couple more hours. So that's one of those things I like to do. But, trying to keep on task, another thing that I will also do, and you maybe have noticed as you've been watching this video, and it may be distracting you, if you're a little ADD, is that there's some stuff floating here. You're probably just seeing the roots, so I actually pulled one out earlier, so I had to fish around. But I like to float plants, okay? Now, there you go, you can see that. This one right here, I just lost a baby. This one right here is actually water lettuce. Now, this is pretty small. You know, if you've seen it in stores, you'll see the pond variety, which this is actually the same stuff. But you'll see when it's grown outdoors in ponds, it'll get, you know, massive. So, what I do though, is I bought just one single plant and I floated it in a tank. And you would not believe how fast these things will absolutely go nuts. And before you know it, I went from 1 to about like 500-600 in probably a couple weeks. So now remember, the big one, it just had babies and had babies and had babies. And the cool thing is the babies are small and they're not so obnoxious. The big one was way too big for an aquarium setting. So once I got the babies from it, I put them in, and I've been just transferring around any tanks where you have any type of algae problems. Now here's a little bit of a warning notice. This is exact same type of thing like duckweed, where sometimes you can't get rid of it once you get it in your tank. Is it necessarily a bad thing? That's for you to decide. I personally like the look of some floating plants, but it's one of those things where now instead of having to prune your plants every yada 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 weeks, now one of those other things you're going to have to do is net off, you know, a couple hundred of these things a week, or a month or whatever, you know, not 100 a week, but you know what I mean. What I'm trying to say is this stuff can go crazy. But the awesome part about it is that because they're floating, a lot of floating plants are absolutely fantastic at absorbing excess nutrients in your water column because they don't, you know, yeah, it has a root system, but they're not rooted into anything. Okay, so because they're floating, they're drawing all their nutrients out of the water column, which is what we're trying to kind of relieve right now. So until your plants can get a firm grasp, you know, because right now the problem is my plants, yeah, sure, some of them are doing good. As you can see, you know, my dwarf sag is actually starting to set up little sprouts. You know, I've only planted 3 here, 3 there, 3 there, and I've got about, you know, 8 there, 9 there, 10 there, you know, so they're starting to spread already, so that's fantastic. Dwarf sag, rooted, boom. The jungle fowl in the back, that stuff is getting there, okay? As you can see, they're starting to send off some babies now too. And the second you start seeing runners come off of these types of plants, that's when you know, okay, good, I've got a firm grasp on it, and my parent plants are starting to root. So once they're starting to root, they'll send off a couple babies. You'll see that they're going to melt back a little bit, especially the jungle fowl. That happens, they melt back. They're coming back now with new life, and probably on the camera you don't even know they exist. But I promise you, behind this whole log, it's just solid jungle val. And eventually that's going to come up right over here. And the way I've got my power head set up for these guys to play in, it keeps a nice current along the front, which brings the fish to the front, and they like to play in it. And then it sweeps around and draws everything back over towards the filter, which is great, so most of my debris and stuff gets sucked right up in that. And it's also going to have a nice backflow on the back wall with the jungle val, so you're going to see once it gets up to the surface of the water, it's going to be cresting over, and you're going to have a nice, not only is there going to be, action shots for the fish, but you're also going to see a lot of movement in that grass too, so it's going to look really cool, really cool. So that's basically what I've got going. As you can see, the Java moss has already taken hold. We got a puppy that's visiting right now. Okay, come on, get out. I'm trying to make a video. But seriously, this stuff is actually rooting pretty well too. I only put little clumps of Java moss on there, and they've rooted really nice already, so that's going pretty great. So, as you can see, well, maybe you can't, but this little tiny guy right there, that is the Madagascar lakes. But seriously, it's going to get awesome. It'll be ginormous. So you got to work with me right here. I know some of you have, problems visualizing tanks, and that's one of the biggest problems when you're starting out to set up a tank. And even if you don't, if you've never really set up a plant before, this can be really challenging because you don't even know what the plants are going to look into or going to grow into. So it's always good to do your research on your plants. I know all these plants in here. I know what they're going to look like when they're fully mature. So right now it may not be where I want it to be specifically, but I also know that in a few months, when I show you the update on this tank, so that's also an illusion if you guys haven't caught my drift, that you're not going to be seeing this tank for a few months because you're going to be seeing a lot more tanks, which you should be excited about. But you'll notice when I come back to this that hopefully, if all goes well, this Madagascar lace will have taken over this entire side of the tank. It will be ginormous, and you will love it just as much as I do. So, I've talked enough. Hopefully I have taught you a little bit about dirted tanks. You're getting some stuff from it. I've tried to make sure that no matter what, we're going through this together, and by all means, I now, if you haven't already noticed, have another option for you guys to get a hold of me. So I know this YouTube thing kind of gets crazy, but I've actually started up a Facebook page. So if you go on Facebook and you look up Cloud9 Aquariums for groups, yeah, he's really into fish. Sorry, I got him absolutely nuts on these things. But hey, you know what? At least now I have somebody else who's just as pumped as I am. But yeah, it's my roommate's dog for all of you who are really wondering. And yes, he does sit here and look at fish. So I know you're all jealous. But back to Facebook. I've got a Facebook group going now. Look up Cloud9 Aquariums. On the website, you can post pictures of your tanks just to collaborate with other aquarists, because we all like to look at other people's tanks. I'll give you tips and stuff. This is a good way to reach out. We can answer questions there. Use it like a forum, just like you've been using the YouTube comments. But I encourage you to use that because it's a little bit easier when it comes to a forum type of a thing. So by all means, post your questions. And those of you who are very well versed in this thing and been doing it for years, by all means, get on there and answer some questions. I can't always get to everything, as you've known. But again, this is also a great opportunity for you guys to give me some video ideas, things you want to see. I already know there's a ton of stuff you guys want to see, updates on these tanks, updates on this. Believe me, I still got all the fish that I had before. So I know you want to see them. I'm going to start pumping out some crazy videos and that type of stuff. Really just wanted to finish up this playlist, and now we're going to move on to some other stuff. So welcome new subscribers. By all means, please share this video and check out the Facebook. So until then, I hope this dirted tank video has brought you and hopefully your new dirted tank closer to Cloud9.